Now, has the Labour Party opened a transgender politics can of worms? Labour's Bridget Phillipson said that the guidance on what pupils can and cannot be taught about gender will be reviewed if the Labour Party win the election. Speaking yesterday, the Shadow Education Secretary refused to say if Labour would maintain a newly announced ban on teaching what Kemi Badenoch calls gender ideology. Phillipson simply said, "There are trans people within society and their existence should be recognised." However, today the Labour Party's leader, Sir Keir Starmer, appeared to contradict his Shadow Education Minister, saying, "No, I'm not in favour of ideology being taught in our schools on gender." Clear? What's going on? Delighted to be joined now by teacher and journalist Debbie Hayton. And Debbie, first of all, what was the change that Kemi Badenoch announced, just to get the context of where we are in this fairly...
Well, it was Kemi Badenoch and Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, and they announced, they announced a consultation on a policy which will stop children being taught that there's 103 genders and you can choose which one from the smorgasbord, and if you haven't got a gender identity, then perhaps you should go and find one.
And this was mid-consultation, the election sort of broke through that process, and now the Labour Party are saying that they might not necessarily restart it were they to get into office.
Yes, so clearly it was something that caught Bridget Phillipson out, I suspect, and she wasn't clear on what Labour will do, and it just brings a lot of uncertainty to the classroom. It brings a lot of uncertainty to teachers. We need a bit more certainty to teachers in what we should be teaching children and what we should not be teaching children.
I think everyone can agree that certainty is very good in this debate, where clearly there's been a lot of uncertainty and people don't really know what to say a lot of the time. One of the big concerns from some campaigners about legislation like this, new rules like this for schools, is it harks back to what was known as Section 28, brought in the late 1980s, which said that you can't promote homosexuality in schools. And the problem with that was that then teachers sort of thought, goodness me, what counts as promoting homosexuality? How far do we go? And basically what happened was books was taken out of libraries. People felt that they couldn't even discuss that gay people existed because people were so scared of falling foul of this rule. Sometimes new rules can be more ambiguous and more harmful, even if they're intended to clear things up.
Yeah, but the analogy with Section 28 of the 1980s, I think, is false. So, homosexuality never put children on puberty blockers, never had teenage girls amputate their breasts. That's been happening. And these ideas have been promoted in schools, that children would be happier if they delayed their puberty.
There were similar arguments, though, around gay people and public toilets, around gay people and children. I mean, there are very similar themes towards the debate and the discussions that we hear now around transgender people.
Yes, but what we see here is children potentially being harmed by an ideology which tells them that they may well be the opposite sex, and they may be happier being the opposite sex. And it's not true, Tom. People have a biological sex, and that needs to be the basis of what we teach, the foundation.
Is the risk here, though, that with new rules coming in for schools, teachers might be overzealous, afraid of being sued, afraid of being cracked down upon by a government, and therefore simply not mention that transgender people exist at all? Is that a risk?
Well, my students know that a transgender person exists because I teach them. But what happens is that teachers go into education. I'm there to teach physics, my colleagues are there to teach maths, my other colleagues are there to teach English. These issues, teachers do not know a lot about these things, and when the government, under a previous iteration of the RSE guidelines, said that we must teach about gender identity.
That's religious sex and education.
Relationship sex and education. We must teach about gender identity. There was no resources in school to do that, and a vacuum appeared, and then there were various activist groups, Stonewall being one, Mermaids being another, were quite happy to deliver materials into schools.
And one of the big concerns about that is parents couldn't see the materials that were being shown to children. Some arguments were made around copyright and all the rest of it. I mean, I suppose some of these reforms proposed by Gillian Keegan and Kemi Badenoch wanted to make sure that parents could see that material. Do we know what the Labour Party has said if they would continue that at the very least?
Well, it's unclear what the Labour Party thinks. I don't think the Labour Party really understands the situation. That is the problem, and I don't think they understand the issues that they're talking about.
And just very lastly, the Labour Party has also said it wants to make the process of getting a gender recognition certificate easier. Originally, they supported self-ID, like Nicola Sturgeon did in Scotland, but they've moved from that to sort of this halfway house between the panel of doctors and lawyers that exists now and a total free-for-all, just one doctor.
Well, one doctor, but who? and without a second opinion, and a doctor which will be taking a fee perhaps from the patient. And if a doctor will write what the patient wants them to write, they collect their fee. There is no second opinions, there's going to be no second opinion and no panel of legal experts to see if the procedure's been followed.
Do you think that the process now is too legalistic, too much anonymised and focused on panels?
Well, there needs to be a panel to decide whether the legal process has been followed, and that's what actually happens. The process, in my view, is there. If anything, it needs to be tightened up. It's open to abuse, and we need to be looking at why people are applying for GRC and why they need a GRC.
Well, Debbie Hayton, thank you so much for coming in and talking through those twin issues that no doubt will, I think, be bubbling up in the media if the Labour Party win the next election.